Hey, it's News from Heaven. Today we're going to be talking about unlocking the true potential of your mind. That would be nice because the model that I have doesn't seem unlocked. It seems like it's missing some features. Actually, what my mind currently mostly functions to do, this is being a little harsh, but let's just follow it, is it serves to serve up a bunch of distressing stuff to me. It takes life as it's seen out here, the people, the places, that's a place, the things, and weaves them into a narrative that makes me upset. That's what the mind does right now. Is there a way that the mind can provide us with something a little bit more peace-generating, hope-generating, and, I guess love, if we can get there. So this is going at Divine Love and Wisdom, number 67. Download the book for free. Follow along if you want. We begin talking about climbing levels. I need also to explain briefly how we climb, or rather are lifted, from the last level to the first. These are talking, if you look at the context right above here, these are talking about the levels of creation, or the levels of reality. So let's see where we start out. We're born on the lowest level of the physical world and are lifted to the second level by means of factual knowledge. So if we're talking about the lowest level of the physical world, we're not talking about, so here's, you're up on a mountain here, and then there's a valley here, and then you get down to like the Red Sea or some low elevation, and we're here, or we're in the Mariana Trench over here. We're talking about the physical level of reality is the lowest, you could also say outermost level. Doesn't mean it's not useful, but it's not the core of things. And we're lifted, and this particularly is in context of how this affects how we think, how we perceive life, what motivates us as well. And we start out at the lowest level of the physical world, just observing things. You remember my diagram from back here. We're observing things and drawing conclusions. Based on that, we're really sort of reacting to that. But then we're lifted to the second level by means of factual knowledge. So as we not just, object, color, as we begin to learn things, that allows us to move up into rationality. Then as we develop our discernment through this knowledge, we're lifted up to the third level and become rational. So he's describing a tripart mind where there is physical world. So the physical world is here. Then we get factual knowledge. And then finally, we build from that to become rational. Okay, great. That's it for today. The 3 ascending levels in the spiritual world are within this. Okay. Resting on the 3 physical levels and do not become visible until we leave our earthly bodies. We went from nondescript to weird fast. So there are these 3 different levels in the physical, and everybody can agree that we have our baseline consciousness, we learn things, and from that we develop a more refined understanding of the world. But Swedenborg is saying that within these things, just like we often depict it as you've got a body, and then within the body you have a spirit, or a vital essence that's in there, okay? So it is within these levels. So it is rationality. Rat didn't really do it. Within these levels, there are the spiritual levels. There are 3 brand new levels, and whatever they are, they're shadowing these. And actually, just like the spirit is completely linked and interconnected with the body at every moment and every element, so these spiritual levels are connected to the way our mind develops. So when we're talking about unlocking the potential of the mind, you've got to know a little bit about what's under the hood, and particularly that there is this second arena in which it exists. It's not just the physical. And that stuff, if you don't know about it, don't feel so bad. It doesn't become visible until we leave our earthly bodies. When we do, the first spiritual level is open for us. So after the physical body dies, we're left with the spirit, and then also we get to open up this level. Then the second, and finally the third. However, this last happens only for people who become angels of the third heaven. These are the ones who see God. You may have heard Swedenborg talk about these 3 different levels of heaven, and you may think, well, that's a little bit arbitrary and strange to have levels of heaven. Isn't that a little bit hierarchical, or it's reward and punishment, or is there really like a caste system in heaven? But if you think about that, these levels are not just God putting up a fence, but that these are related to, just like, when you just observe the physical world, there's a certain level of heaven or happiness that you can exist in, a certain level of consciousness you can exist in. When you move up into factual knowledge, when you're able to not just have a reaction to the sensory input, but learn things and learn patterns and learn systems and have abstract conceptions of what's going on, there's a greater depth at which we can then be conscious and be satisfied and be whole, right? And you just know that unless you have that knowledge in there, you just can't get there if you don't have the building blocks. And then to be able to develop that stuff and refine it into a cohesive, rational, wise worldview, we know that changes what your priorities are, what you think is important, and you can see there's a certain kind of happiness that can only be placed into that system. So these levels in the spiritual world are the same way, that it's not, well, you just can't come in here. Even if you came in here, you'd be happy. This has to do with what we've equipped our mind with spiritually. And so you have the spiritual equivalent of rationality. And think about all the good connotations of that. You're being irrational versus you're being rational. So to have that in the spirit is what the third heaven is, what seeing God is, because see corresponds to understand. So really the spiritual rationality, when you have all the right data and you really know what's good and bad and make your decisions according to that, that is seeing or understanding God. Angels of the second heaven and of the lowest heaven are people in whom the second and lowest level can be opened. That's all it is. And look at this can, because it's the unceasing effort of God to open that for everyone. That is what our whole trajectory of life is trying to do, is make it so that we can progress. Just like education tries to get us to progress on those first 3 rungs, don't ever forget these ones here. This spiritual stuff is trying to make it so that all the spiritual growth and progress and the things we learn through going through the ups and downs and the regeneration and all that stuff that seems like it's quite a weight to bear, is to get it so that we can be spiritually rational, so we can have a heavenly or celestial level of our mind opened. The opening of each spiritual level within us depends, how do you do it? Depends on our acceptance of divine love and wisdom from the Lord. That's what it is. So it's almost a passive thing. It's not that we need to go out there and conquer the world and learn everything and somehow build for ourselves sort of this Tower of Babel that'll get us up there. This is actually about becoming open, becoming receptive. That's a different way to think about it, isn't it? Not that I'm going to create this thing, but that I'm going to prepare myself to receive it. Makes me think of the body being a temple that God dwells in. Okay, so that's the attitude. If we're unlocking the mind, we know that the thing that the mind becomes when it's unlocked, what we're really unlocking is the door that is blocking divine love and wisdom from coming in. People who accept some of this love and wisdom reach the first or lowest spiritual level. People who accept more reach the second or intermediate spiritual level, and people who accept a great deal reach the third or highest level. However, people who do not accept any divine love and wisdom stay on the physical levels, deriving from the spiritual levels only enough to allow them to think and therefore talk and to intend and therefore to act, but not intelligently. And I think Swedenborg goes to great lengths to explain that intelligent doesn't mean clever. Swedenborg talks to quite a lot of, evil spiritual beings, which would be people who have completely shut out love and wisdom and chosen harmful things that they wouldn't want done to them as what they want to do to everybody else. And Swedenborg has plenty of in-depth conversations with them, and they can be very bright, and they can understand even spiritual things very well. But because true intelligence is in exercising the right motivations along with your knowledge or your wisdom, because you can have all these facts and lead just a horrific life with them. That's not smart. It's not smart because it's mean, but it's also not smart because it leads you to a really limited, unhappy end. I mean, it puts you, he says, you stay on the physical level. So that doesn't mean you stay in the physical world, but you stay in that same mindset, which is just this sort of, what is that? It's the lizard brain, the reptilian brain, just kind of reacting, and you're basically asleep, and you're going after gratification regardless of the consequences. So you stay stuck on that level. The spiritual levels will never abandon you totally, but all they can get in is just the ability to live. Life, by the way, comes from spiritual stuff. So this is what it is. That's what hell is a complete unwillingness to open to anything higher and to stay on that outermost level. There is something else we need to know about this lifting of the inner levels of our minds. Okay, great. Well, if we need to know it, we got to learn it. Oh, don't do that. Reaction is characteristic of everything created by God. Okay, if God is the initial force, I don't know if the prime mover is an appropriate term, but if God is motion, we are, the effect, the thing that is moved by God. Only life is action. I'm having some real stray pen marks this time, which is great. It's just me reacting to something. Only life is action, while reaction is prompted by the action of life. So even though the appearance is very strong, the one who is doing things, starting things, is God. We have our reactions to that impulse. The reaction seems proper to the created being because it becomes perceptible when that being is stirred. It seems just like, well, I want to go do something, so I'll go do it. So when it happens in us, it seems to be our own. And this is actually a super important part of what it is to be human. The reason is that even though we are only life receivers, we have no sense that our life is anything but our own. So, the essence of the key, this strange key to unlocking the true potential of the mind, is to gain this realization of the partnership that we have with God, where while we are a receiver, we are part of things, we actually are so intimately linked that our life itself is coming from that source. And if we can get the balance where we're not just saying, well, then I'm nothing and I'm not going to do anything, but that I'm going to be active, but knowing that I'm part of a larger chain of being rather than an isolated, little nuclear reactor that generates its own power, but I'm more like a solar panel that is pulling in light from another, pouring in energy from another source. That gets us open to receive divine love and wisdom, which, as we mentioned way up here before, that is how we get to these spiritual levels here. And just so you know, this is why Swedenborg is writing this whole thing. We're about to go from feeling good to a bunch of harsh stuff. But let's see if that can't help us out here. I know I was painting this picture of us as against the things, and it could be that a little religious critique makes us feel worse, but it could make us feel better. I often feel like it makes me feel better. So let's see. This is why we react against God as a result of our inherited evil. This would be the tendency to love evil things. Why do we have a struggle in the first place? Why does the human race have such a hard time getting its act together? Because there is just this natural gravitation towards enjoying what is dysfunctional. So that tendency in us, which is at war with the good stuff coming from God, creates this negative reaction to anything good and true coming in. And it happens often at the subconscious level. However, to the extent that we believe, and this is why this is important, however, to the extent that we believe that all our life comes from God, and that everything good about it comes from an act of God, okay? You don't have to say everything. Everything good about it comes from an act of God. Everything bad comes from hell, which is a twisting of God's original intentions. And everything bad about it from our own reaction. And because what is our own is an illusion, because it's actually what we feel like, oh, this is me. The ego that is intensely self-focused and intensely reflective is actually hell's influence on us, which, again, is a whole trip in itself. But once grasped onto, I've never found a more potent tool to get me to, as soon as this stuff that is hell is coming in, to say, oh, you're not me, so I don't need to bring you in. Because why do we believe all these negative messages? Because it feels like they're coming from us. We're much less savvy with these things than we are from, let's say, a person was talking smack about us. We would try to filter that out. We would argue against it. But our own mind comes in and talks smack against us, and we say, oh yeah, that must be right. Our reaction becomes a property of the action, and we are then acting with God with apparent autonomy. So if you can get this complex thing to work it over in your mind and have it be something that makes sense to you and gives life to you, that is the way we open up and let God in. So let's just review this a teeny bit more. To the extent that we believe all our life comes from God, and that everything good about it comes from an act of God, and everything bad about it from our own reaction, I would say, you can say hell's reaction as well, but hell always comes under the guise of, this is you, I'm sticking up for you. Okay, time out. Isn't that how everybody gets manipulated? We talk about if you're trying to whip people into a frenzy so that they will act politically the way you want them to act, don't you introduce a threat? Don't you say, this thing is a threat to you? This is, or this, you are in this group, and this group deserves this over that. People appealing to somebody's isolated sense of tribal identity is how everyone tries to manipulate other people. So hell is doing the same thing, because that's what adds, why does anybody do it? That's what gets people off the couch, is that sort of feeling. So if you're looking at the reaction, hell is trying to bring you from this, and realizing, look, the good stuff is coming in from God, and that's what I want. The bad stuff is coming in from hell. That's not what I want. Then our reaction becomes a property of the action, or a part of God's actual agency. The part of the plan to get us into these three levels of spiritual rationality, to bring us to the greatest happiness possible. Yeah, the equilibrium of all things comes from an action and immediate reaction, and everything must necessarily be in an equilibrium. So we can make it an equilibrium that's moving us to a higher place, or an equilibrium that's keeping us stuck. Because it could, if we suddenly are letting in this God stuff, then we are lighter than our place. So that raises us up to, we try to have it be this level, that's good, or this level, or this level. You define your spiritual weight by this. But if you just latch on, then, okay, well, we're here. And the whole point is, here is not good enough. This world in the mind is what we're trying to get out of, because I don't like it. That's why we're trying to find out, how do you move up? How do you solve those problems? And it's important, as I was saying last episode, you always got to know why. The why is everything. As we did a whole show about why Swedenborg talking about this, I mentioned these things to prevent any belief that we ourselves climb up to God on our own power. It is done by the Lord. And there you get a little context. It's not just to make us feel negative. There is a latent toxicity in this idea of, I'm going to bootstrap myself into morality. Because this is something that has been rampant in religion forever, right? Where people say, look how good I am, and I am the reason that I'm good. Just think of, how nice is that for you at Thanksgiving or whatever, when people are looking at your life and judging it from a belief that they are good. That they are good and you are not good. In general, out in the world, how does it work to have people saying, I'm good because I didn't do that thing that you did? Does that help? Does that ever help? And the reason why it doesn't fit, you would think the basic equation would be get people together and we're all good and we don't like people who aren't good. I could see, like, in a very simplified state why in a vacuum you'd think that would work. But the problem is, what this is saying is nobody is better morally than someone else from their intrinsic self, because the good stuff, it's certainly outcomes and actions. There are some people's lives that cause much more harm than other people's lives, but the credit for that goodness is to God, because God is coming into each of us into hostile territory and bringing good out of it. Just because God has been able to succeed more with you than succeed more with a person doesn't mean that, it's great to have a model of lives that go well and to pursue that and to hold that up, but it doesn't mean that I am better than this person, because I, without God, wouldn't be anywhere. I would be as low as you can possibly go. It's maybe a little bit of a bitter pill, and it leaves some questions. However, I find if you apply it right away, man, does that clear up the mind. So I'm going to leave it. I'm not going to drill this in ad nauseum with you. There's the idea. You think about it. You let me know. Is there value in it? What is the value in it? If there's not, that's fine too. The comment section is there for everybody, for everything. But does this set us free? Does it do something like that? If so, then it might just be true. Okay. Guys, I really like talking about this kind of stuff, and I do want to really hear, how does this affect you? And what do you do with it? And where do we go next? All right. Thanks.